We'll start with Raven at the end.
Yeah, so the way I approach world building is I'm super visual. So I want, when someone's reading, I want you to be able to smell the scene and see the scene and hear it. And just completely, especially for fantasy, just be completely engrossed. And that's what I try to do when I world build. So I'll just start going on the keyboard and it'll just build as I go. And then when I go back to flesh again and again and again and add from the bones to get more and more, I really try to focus on all the senses. And then even if I'm just showing like one little aspect of it, like a gilded cage in a golden castle, then I just build and I try to make it as realistic in a fantasy setting as I can, just so that the reader can just really feel like they're there with the character.
Yeah, I think it honestly depends on the book. So I have some that are much higher fantasy, and I would consider like Belladonna a lower fantasy. You know, the main character, the love interest, is Death himself. It's a very like gothic Bridgerton sort of story, like Victorian era. So that is less fantastical than like my first series or what I'm working on now. And with something that is higher fantasy, requires more of that world building, I think I personally start with the magic system. Like, is it going to be hard or soft? And I kind of build the world around that system. Like, how does the magic affect people's daily lives? Like what they wear, what food they eat, what their jobs are, like everything, every aspect of their life. I need to figure out the magic system first and how they use it and how it affects them in order to really build the world from there.
Yeah, my world building is probably the hardest part for me, so clearly we should write a book together.
So you get there. We get there then.
I mean, we get, yes, because all roads lead to Rome, right? No, but even right now, I have a book that I have, these revision notes from my editor, and I'm doing second round revisions, and I just have so many comments in the margin where they're like, can we add more atmosphere? Can we add more? Can we add? And I'm like, no, can't they just sit in the empty room and talk? No, but as far as the overall world building, as far as it comes to, magic or truly the atmosphere, I like to give myself a lot of freedom, especially in the first draft, and throw whatever I want on the page right from the beginning. If it seems cool in the moment, I will add it, because I know I can always fix it later, whether it's magic, whether it's, what the location looks like, whether it's what weapons they have access to. I am constantly reminding myself that it's okay if I get it wrong, because I can go back and fix it later. So I have a really loose approach to any kind of world building.
I love world building. It's one of my favorite parts. I'm also a very visual writer in the sense of and I have to work to build in the other senses that are not just what everything looks like. And I actually have to pare down my world building during editing, because I will get so far in the weeds about, I'll just be paragraphs of me monologuing about something in the scene as characters are just standing there. So it's you have to dial it back. But I love, so these I think are a little bit more character first, but it's a really fun, whimsical, small town setting that you make a lot of dad jokes just in the background. But I like creating a sense of a rich environment where even if you're not exploring in more detail the things on the page, you reference things. So there's a sense the world is lived in, that the world is bigger than the book, and that there's other people inhabiting this world with their own stories. Servant of Earth, which is coming in November, was a very heavy world-building book up front, because it was Fae. I knew I needed to figure out the magic system right away. There's 6 houses, there's different powers, but I also have to figure out how the powers play well together, because you can't overpower one house, you can't underpower another, and then you need to figure out the constraints, because I think just magic with no constraints on it, it makes for personally less interesting fiction for me to read. I like it when there are rules, I like it when there are consequences, or when the characters really have to work for it, or magic corrupts. Anything like that I think adds a lot of tension to the story. So yeah, also my background is in archaeology. I'm not doing that right now, but that was what I did back in the day, and I think it gave me an appreciation for the little things that make up daily life. It's about the architecture, it's about the tools they use, it's about the trade networks, it's about whatever the connections are in the physical space, that the characters are all part of this larger context.
You're smart.
Oh.
Take notes. Pick your brain later. No, I love world building. Once I know know the characters and sort of understand what I want from them and who they are, then that's when I dig into the world. And I really take a lot of inspiration from film, from TV, from other books I read. I'm such a nerd for like those big, adventurous, just over-the-top movies. Pirates of the Caribbean was like the inspiration for this book of just like swashbuckling chaos. And so yeah, I am such a nerd when it comes to history. As soon as I realized that the main male character, Mariano, was a pirate, I dug so deep, so hardcore into pirate history. I listened to every podcast, and you'd be surprised how many pirate podcasts there are. It's really, really fascinating. And I learned so much, and I thought, oh, you know what, maybe I can write a historical romance, and I started, and I was like, no, I'm not that smart. Let me just make it a fantasy world. And yeah, so for me, as soon as I understand the world that I want to create, I dig deep into what that world would look like in our world, and then I tweak it. And so for the next book I'm doing, which is it's called A Cruel Thirst, it's very like Zorro, vibes. And so I did a deep dive into California, what was the Mexican Empire at the time, his story, and so added all these little bits into the world that maybe I might only know, but it makes me feel smart adding those things.
Thanks, everybody. All right, we have our characters, we have our world. Now let's get to some of what makes the shadow baddies the shadow baddies. What are some of the...
If you like cartoons, movies, books, music, I demand you subscribe to this channel. Subscribe, be prepared. Subscribe or be prepared for doom. Do not resist. Do not resist. Subscribe. Subscribe. Subscribe.